The next bill on the calendar of the day is Senate File 3567. The clerk will report the bill.
Senate File number 3567, number 8 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to education, the second engrossment.
Representative Pryor, before we explain your bill, do you want to put the House language into your bill?
Yes, that would be my motion.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Pryor moves to amend Senate File number 3567, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded DEA 3782.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? No. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. Representative Pryor, to your bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. This is the last bill of the night, so just in case you were wondering and got lost in the floor. I know, but it's the best one. Okay. All right, this is the education policy bill. So last year's historic education bill set the groundwork for generational investments in our kids. This wide-ranging policy bill that you have before you tonight picks up where last year's bill left off. We focus on important measures to give schools flexibility, address students' mental health, eliminate special education paperwork, address protected speech, and more. The purpose of these policies is to put the focus where it belongs, on our kids. This is a bill we can all be proud to support. I'm going to go through a list of some of the highlights of the bill and some of the authors that brought this work to us. And I do want to introduce this by saying that this bill reflects work from so many people from both sides of the aisle, from our advocates, from our students, from our teachers, from our education community. And as I said, it's something that we can all be proud to support. And I am proud that it is on my name. My name is on it right now. So first of all, from Representative Feist, we're requiring that schools adopt a policy on students' cell phone use in school buildings, and that we have a consistent approach to help students focus on learning. We also have from Representative Hicks a bill that eliminates unnecessary paperwork so special education teachers can spend more time working with their students and ensure these teachers have the training they need to meet those students' needs. From Representative Hassan, Chair Hassan, we require that schools provide mental health education for students in grades 4 through 12, starting in the 26-27 school year. And I just want to take this mention at this point. We're talking about mental health and education in schools. 988 is the suicide hotline. And we want our students to know that. We want us to know this. We want our families to know that. If someone is in that situation and contemplating suicide, there's help, 988. All right, moving on. Representative Norris creates a process for students to assess mental health services through telehealth without needing to leave their school buildings. Thank you, Representative Morris. Representative Baker, are you on the floor? Yes. Representative Baker brought us the 4-day school week and flexibility for local school districts to make that choice. Thank you, Representative Baker, for your work. Representative Feist again, improves state oversight and accountability for charter schools. And then Representative Clardy adds a measure of whether students are on track for graduation at the end of the 9th grade so that schools can intervene early and give students supports that they need to finally graduate from high school and not fall behind. Representative Joachim, thank you for your bill. Establishes clear guidelines for what is protected and unprotected speech in school newspapers to ensure students can engage in spirited debate without fear of censorship for crossing an otherwise subjective line. Representative Hassan again expands access to PSEO classes and concurrent enrollment courses so more students can earn college credits for free while in high school. Representative Bennett, thank you for the Purple Star program, which recognizes schools that are going the extra mile for students in military families. And thank you, Representative Hill, for your work with the teachers licensing, especially special education teachers licensing, where we have a severe shortage in Minnesota, but we need qualified teachers in the classroom. Your work helps to get more of them out there. Thank you, Representative Hill. So with that, members, I know that we have a number of amendments, and let's turn for amendments tonight and further debate. Thank you.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Erdahl moves to amend Senate File Number 3567, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A27.
To the author of the amendment from Meeker County, Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Yesterday, I visited in Litchfield the School District 465 headquarters, met with the superintendent. After our discussion, the district business manager walked over and said, "The independent review, our 148-year-old newspaper, is closing. We are required by state law to disseminate to the public board proceedings. Now, without a newspaper, our only option is to mail district residents. What can we do?" All right, this is a problem that we're being faced with in Minnesota nowadays. The newspaper industry is changing. Small town newspapers are going out of business. I know that Representative Tabke is concerned about Shakopee. And besides Litchfield, the newspaper in Hutchinson also announced that it was closing last week. So this problem then has ramifications in a lot of ways, and one of them does affect our schools. Now, it was 11:30 yesterday morning when I heard about this and the impact on our school districts. So with a noon amendment deadline, I had half an hour to get an amendment done to try to do something. And I give great credit to Christina Parra, the nonpartisan staffer, for getting it done. And so the amendment was submitted on time. But I didn't have any time to consult and to work out any real bugs in this. But under current law, if there is no newspaper office in a school district, or if the newspaper circulation is less than 1/3 of the residences in the school district must send out mailings of school district proceedings to district residents. My amendment adds a website that a school district can implement, an option to inform that if there is no newspaper office or low circulation to reach the public. Now, this is not a perfect solution. As I said, I didn't have a lot of time to work on this, but I found that current law needs clarification and that this remedy needs tweaking. We need to do something. I've spoken with the Representative Pryor before the meeting tonight and asked that in conference committee that this takes some precedence, that people work together to find a solution so that we can help our small town newspapers who are depending upon the income in a lot of cases that they get from printing these proceedings, but also to protect our school districts and the expenses of having to mail things out and being able to use a website. So it's my amendment, maybe not exactly ready for prime time. I'm asking that it, again, be worked on in conference committee, and with that, I withdraw the amendment. Thank you.
The amendment is withdrawn. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Tabke moves to amend Senate File Number 3567, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A28.
The member from Scott, Representative Tabke.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Erdahl, for teeing that up and talking about what the issue is. We have a newspaper company, Southwest Media, that told us just recently that they will be going under at the end of this month, and they will be going out of business, and they will no longer be serving our communities. And with that, there is no, for the Jordan School District, Shakopee School District, Prior Lake Savage School District, and Eastern Carver County School Districts, there will be no newspaper of record available directly to those communities. And so what this amendment does, and thank you for Chair Pryor for talking this through with me yesterday as we were scrambling to get this done as well. What this amendment does is it does two main things. One is to allow just those districts, it's a very narrow focus on this, to use their school website as the newspaper of record, basically. And then secondly, it allows, it is temporary and only through July 1 of 2026. And so it is very narrow scope, and because there's a much larger, as Representative Erdahl talked in, a much larger discussion that has to happen around this issue with newspapers and small town newspapers going out of business. And so there's also an amendment to the amendment to add some technical direction to the bill and make sure that all of the districts are named appropriately.
There is an amendment to the amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment to the amendment.
Habke moves to amend the Tabke amendment to Senate File Number 3567, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A32.
Representative Tabke.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just delineated what the amendment to the amendment does. It adds the district numbers to there and makes some technical changes, so I would appreciate everyone's support.
The member from Scott, Representative Bakeberg.
I would just like to support Representative Tabke's amendment and the underlying amendment. This is a critical issue that literally just happened recently in our communities, and Representative Tabke outlined it well. This will give flexibility to our local districts as we work to find a permanent solution. So thank you for that.
All those in favor of the amendment to the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion prevails and the amendment to the amendment is adopted. Now to the underlying amendment as amended. Discussion. All those in favor of the amendment as amended signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Erdahl moves to amend Senate File Number 3567, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A17.
The member from Meeker, Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This amendment comes to me from the Minnesota State High School Coaches Association, representing 9,000 coaches in Minnesota. There's support for this amendment from education groups beyond the coaching community. This is a bill about fairness. There are instances where coaches in high schools are non-renewed several months or longer after their season ends. For example, a baseball coach's season ends at the end of May. The coach may then work all summer with youth baseball players at little or no pay, and then be terminated in September from coaching baseball. That is unfair and takes advantage of coaches. This amendment says that written notice of the non-renewal of the contract must be given to the coach no more than 60 days after the end of the regular season of the activity. School boards, frankly, should know within that time if they're going to let the coach go. This impacts varsity sport head coaches. If there are reasons for termination, such as misconduct or failure to perform duties or financial, this would not apply. Please support this request from the Minnesota high school coaches for fairness in the coaching fraternity.
The member from Washington, Representative Hill.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Erdahl, for bringing this amendment. I'm recommending a yes vote to the A17 amendment. I've been in proximity to such a policy in the district where I serve students and families, and I've seen this approach utilized effectively to support the needs of all parties involved. And that includes both our district colleagues, administrative colleagues, and the men and women who serve as coaches to our young people. Again, please vote yes. Thank you, Representative Erdahl.
All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Opposed? The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Erdahl moves to amend Senate File Number 3567, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A11.
The member from Meeker, Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. We just keep going all night like this. With the proliferation of social media, many students in our schools may be unaware or simply not understand the impact of some of their actions, particularly in the dissemination of private images. This amendment requires the Department of Education, using existing resources, to develop a model notice that districts or schools can provide to students and guardians or parents about the legal, social, behavioral, and mental health implications of and impact to students and student families regarding the dissemination of private sexual images. This could be provided in a handbook or on the school website. The goal is to educate young people about the ramifications and potential harm of these activities. This is about students taking compromising sexual pictures, known or unknown, and the wrongness of it. We have revenge porn statutes and other statutes. I'm asking that our young people have access to information to help them more clearly understand the ramifications of exposing private sexual images.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Pryor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Erdahl. I mean, this seems to be something that's very doable, and at this point, we can look favorably on the amendment. So, thank you.
All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Bakeberg moves to amend Senate File Number 3567, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A22.
The member from Scott, Representative Bakeberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The A22 amendment is an amendment to provide clarity to school districts about the data that they can share about their own students and their own kids to families. So what it does is provides clarity to schools that they can share MCA data, the preliminary MCA data, to families and to parents and guardians, to just them. So if you would have a conversation with teachers or educators, and you talked to 10 or 15 of them, you probably would get 10 or 15 different answers about what data can be shared from an MCA standpoint. Right now, students, if you have children, your kids are taking the MCA assessments. And there is a lack of clarity, and all this amendment does is it allows school districts to be able to share that data, very explicit. We had testimony from the department that they can do this, but then when you talk to schools, schools are unsure. So we just want to provide clarity. Thank you, Madam.
Member from Hennepin, Representative Pryor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Bakeberg. I know that this is something that we talked about in committee. We're not quite there yet with the language, I think, when this idea was first introduced, and I think this language does have the clarity that we needed. So we appreciate your continued work on this and would like to accept this amendment. Thank you.
Trying to decide if anyone wants to talk. She said accept it. Is anybody? Representative Bakeberg?
Thank you.
All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Bakeberg moves to amend Senate File Number 3567, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A4.
Member from Scott, Representative Bakeberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The A4 amendment is an attendance study group. If you are talking with your schools or frankly your county staff, county attorneys, you are going to hear that attendance and truancy is a significant issue across Minnesota. So what this amendment does is it establishes a bipartisan, bicameral legislative study group to examine the issues centered around chronic absenteeism. And I want to take a moment and recognize Representative Keeler. She and I have had lots of conversations about truancy, and I think this is an example of when we work together on a common cause, what can happen. So I just want to say thank you to Representative Keeler, and then, Madam Speaker, if Representative Keeler would yield for a question.
She will yield. Representative Bakeberg.
Representative Keeler, would you mind giving an update? We worked together on some legislation. Would you give an update on where that is at in the process?
The member from Clay, Representative Keeler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Representative Bakeberg. I have really appreciated having these conversations. So what happened is I had a House File 3827, that was going to ask the agency to really give us some data. What happened was that was going to be a pretty expensive ask, and in a world that we're trying to be fiscally sound, I stole your bill is what happened. And Jody helped me do it, and so we changed a couple things because I think what your bill did had a great idea. We changed it to just be a little bit smaller. We changed, we named some of the scope that we want to make sure that we go over, including that we bring our counties to the table, our principals to the table, our communities to the table to really help us dig into what our attendance issues are, what attendance solutions could be. This is something that I think many in our committee are really dedicated to. We worked through it, it was amended, and we have spoken with the Education Finance Chair, and we're dedicated to getting this across the finish line. And so you do have our word on that, and I actually look forward to working with you on this in the future.
Representative Bakeberg.
Well, the only thing I would correct from Representative Keeler is she didn't steal the bill. We had lots of conversation about it, so I would never want someone to think that she stole the bill, and I appreciate our collaboration. So yeah, with that assurance that we're going to continue to work through with this, I would withdraw the A4 amendment, and I look forward to partnering with anyone in this body that wants to really attack chronic absenteeism and truancy. Because when we think about this, yes, it's within the sphere of education, but it has such lasting impacts across all spheres of society. Look at our juvenile justice system. Look at just the economic impact on it, just to name two. So if this is something that we can really study and then get right, because there's been lots of ideas, and I've had lots of ideas. I've worked with Scott County, who has lots of ideas, but if we can work together and get this right, it will not only impact our kids in school, but across society. So with that, I withdraw the A4.
The amendment is withdrawn. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Bennett moves to amend Senate File Number 3567, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A24.
The member from Freeborn, Representative Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and members. Members, what this amendment will do, it would reinstate the licensing examinations for Tier 3 and 4 teacher applicants, specifically the areas of pedagogy and content. It would allow teachers, or actually have teachers, demonstrate knowledge and skills in those areas. The amendment also restores the assessment requirement for elementary teacher applicants to demonstrate their knowledge and skills of reading instruction. The amendment also allows for multiple options for the type of test or assessment that's given. We all know that not everybody does well at simple paper pencil assessments, and so we should allow for things like perhaps an interview assessment. but we shouldn't just get rid of the assessment totally. So this amendment allows for multiple options for the teacher applicants who don't test well. Members, at a time when our reading scores, our math scores, our science scores have been going down for years actually, but since 2019, actually when Governor Walz entered office, since that time, test scores have gone down immensely. Reading itself, reading proficiency has gone down 16%. We should not be dropping the assessment for our teacher applicants to show themselves proficient at the teaching of reading. And what's happening here is the last couple of years, our legislature, through our majority bills, have actually gotten rid of those assessments for teachers. And they've said for Tier 3 and 4 teachers, it's okay if you go through a teacher prep program that's accredited, you're A-okay. We are going to assume that you are proficient in these things. Well, members, we don't do that for our students. I think of our third graders. We have less than half of third graders in our state are proficient in reading. And we don't tell those third graders, well, I'm really sorry, you have a tough time passing that third grade assessment for reading. So we'll just say if you've gone through first, second, and third grade, you're A-okay. You don't need to take that test. Of course we wouldn't do that. And I know members on this side of the aisle would not think that either. So for our teachers, assuming that seat time in a teacher prep program shows proficiency doesn't make sense, just like it doesn't make sense for those third graders. So members, I would ask that we place these assessments back in with the multiple options for those teachers who have, or prospective teachers who have a tough time taking tests, because showing proficiency is absolutely important. So I guess I'll end it right there and ask that we vote green on this amendment.
Discussion to the amendment. The member from Washington, Representative Hill.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Bennett, for continuing this dialogue. Last year, many of you may recall, we did a lot of important work surrounding teacher licensure. And when it comes to these exams, they've been studied at length. And there's been no discernible correlation between an applicant's test score and their ability and level of success in serving students and families in the classroom. This change made last year to remove this testing requirement is already helping impact our critical teacher shortage here in Minnesota, allowing for more than 800 applicants to move forward and to become fully licensed teachers. For those reasons, I'm going to recommend a no vote on this amendment. Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those, the member from Mauer, Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And before we begin, I would like to ask for roll call on this amendment, please.
Representative Mueller requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members, for this discussion. I would like to just explain that while we have talked about how there's been vast studies done about these teacher licensing exams and the connection that they have to whether or not a person is a good teacher or not. You know, I was one of those people that had to take the exam twice. I understand that we need to be able to have multiple pathways to be able to show competency. Pelsby talks a lot about making sure that we honor the performative nature of teaching, and so, you know, that's what this amendment does, is to make sure that if the paper pencil test just isn't jiving with you, that there is a way for you to show your competency. But I would like to say that I was just doing some preparation for some of my amendments later on, and I came across the National Council on Teacher Quality that talked about licensure tests. And when we're talking about reading especially, one of the reasons why maybe these license tests is because they're weak and they're not doing their job. That doesn't mean we get rid of them. That means we look at the test and we say, we got to have a better test. Matter of fact, many of the things that they were talking about here was a strong test in the science of reading, and many of the tests are weak in testing the science of reading, but the recommendation from National Council on Teacher Quality was not ditch the test. That wasn't the recommendation. The recommendation was to state legislators require a strong reading test for anyone teaching students in elementary grades. Require a strong test that actually shows competency, that actually shows that it's important for them to know how to teach reading. It says elementary teachers deserve a fair and accurate assessment of what they do and do not understand about scientifically based reading instruction. They deserve that. They deserve to know. They deserve, schools and districts, it says later on, deserve assurance that every licensed elementary teacher meets the essential expectations so they don't have to go back and retrain them. Because that's what we're doing now. We're going back and retraining them. Not because of the fault of the teacher or the fault of the student, but because we didn't hold fast to the science of reading. We didn't hold fast to what we were supposed to be doing. And then to just get rid of the test, an independent mechanism that's going to show our competency, that's premature. It's very much so premature to just say, oh, can't do it. We need to do something else, or we need to look at that test. And that's exactly what they're saying. With stronger, their conclusion was, with stronger licensure tests, states can provide real assurance that every teacher enters a classroom with knowledge and skills aligned to the reading research. You know, while we are going the opposite direction and getting rid of these tests, many states are saying, you know what, we need to make sure that our teachers do know what they're reading and what they're teaching, and they do know how to teach the science of reading, that they are getting the instruction that they need from their pre-service instructions. Matter of fact, when I went through, again, all the states that have reading exam, or have, when they're looking at their reading legislation, 19 states, almost every single one of the states except for one, that would be us, every single one requires a test. But in the newest research, the newest review of the legislation, especially from 23, there are 19 states that said we need to have a more robust and rigorous test on the science of reading. So, Representative Bennett, thank you for bringing this amendment. We definitely need a green vote on this. It doesn't just trap our candidates in saying that you have to pass this paper pencil test or else, but it acknowledges that there is a necessity to show competency so that we have assurances at our school level, but that we also have the assurances for the teachers. I don't know how many times during my first term that I had people come to the committee and say, I didn't learn how to teach reading. That wasn't the fault of the teacher. That was the fault of the school that was teaching that teacher. And there are people who have a vested interest in keeping the system the same. And throwing out a test, throwing out rigor that's going to give that elementary school teacher assurance that they know what they know so that they can teach these kids a fundamental skill. Throwing that test away is premature. Please vote green for the Representative Bennett amendment.
The member from Freeborn, Representative Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Mueller, for asking for a roll call, as you beat me to it, so that was good. Members, again, at a time when test scores are plummeting, we should not be lowering our expectations and our standards for teachers. And I think back years ago, former President Reagan had a statement. He said, trust but verify. Well, that's what we should do here. We'll trust our teacher prep programs, but we should always verify. Let's return these assessments. Let's give that flexibility for those teachers that have a tough time with paper pencil tests, but let's assess the proficiency of our prospective teachers. I ask for a green vote.
The clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Will the clerk please call the name of the member who's voting remotely?
Daniels.
Daniels votes yes.
Daniels votes aye.
Have all members voted who wish to vote? The clerk will close the roll. There being 62 ayes and 69 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Bennett moves to amend Senate File Number 3567, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A6.
The member from Freeborn, Representative Bennett, to your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this A6 amendment deletes the two sections relating to Tier 1 and special education licensure. Tier 1 and Tier 2 are meant to be doorways for prospective teachers, alternative ways for people to enter the teaching field. And more than ever, we need teachers. We all know about that shortage. What this does is take out some of these added requirements that have been added onto the Tier 1 teacher lane that are not necessary. The federal government, when it analyzed our special education teachers, determined that Tier 1 teachers who are teaching special ed were teaching longer than 3 years, and the federal government said, don't do that. So all we need to do, members, is just say that for special education, Tier 1 teachers can only teach 3 years. Simple fix. We don't have to add a bunch of burdensome requirements onto that tier level, because we want teachers to enter the teaching field and utilize Tier 1 and 2. So I just ask for a green vote. Thank you.
Discussion to the A6 amendment. The member from Washington, Representative Hill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thanks again to Representative Bennett for bringing this amendment. As we did in committee, I'm going to ask for a no vote on the amendment. We want to ensure that any teacher in our Tier 1 and Tier 2 ranks receive the proper professional development they need to grow and the proper mentoring that they need to grow in their buildings, in their districts. We can't just simply renew folks who are new to the profession without adding these supports. Please vote no.
Further discussion to the amendment. Representative Bennett.
I will just again ask that we simplify the process, and please vote green.
All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed to the amendment, please say no. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Bennett moves to amend Senate File Number 3567, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A7.
The member from Freeborn, Representative Bennett.
Well, Madam Speaker, I'm just wondering if I should have Representative Erdahl present my amendments, because he was on a roll and I'm not. Okay. Thank you. Got to have some fun, right? So this amendment directs PELSB, the Teacher Licensing and Standards Board, to streamline special education licensing for out-of-state candidates. It deletes the requirement to have a legislative working group, and instead directs PELSB to review and revise the requirements and just get the job done. Members, I've found in the legislature, being my 10th year now, it doesn't even seem like I've been here that long, that we spend a lot of time admiring problems here and not very much time actually fixing them and getting to work. In this case, PELSB is well aware of the issues. We are so far out of alignment with other states with our special education licensing. Pelsby knows what to do. We don't need another group to admire the problem. Let's get it fixed. Let's have Pelsby get that fixed. We have a critical shortage of special education teachers, and we need to get this job done. So thank you, members.
Discussion to the amendment. The member from Washington, Representative Hill.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and thanks yet another time, Representative Bennett, for bringing this amendment and continuing this important conversation. Tonight, I'm going to ask for a no vote on this amendment. This reciprocity approach is going to allow us to take on directly this teacher shortage that we find ourselves in, particularly in special education roles. And we believe that the most effective quality outcome of this working group will be to have stakeholders who are practitioners, folks who do the work not only in the classroom but in our administrative ranks as well, to come around this problem and to examine it closely so that we can get the best outcome. And so as we move forward, we know that here in Minnesota we want every single one of our children, without exception, to have a great, high-quality teacher in front of them so they can have a world-class educational opportunity. And for those reasons, I ask for a no vote so we can get this right and attack this problem head-on. Thank you.
Further discussion to the amendment. Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Knutson moves to amend Senate File Number 3567, the second engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A12.
The member from Cass, Representative Knutson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, what the A12 amendment does, it strikes down MDE's proposal to delay the release of our academic assessments, our MCA scores, by another 3 months. Currently, MDE is required to release these assessment scores publicly by September 1st. As Bakebird highlighted earlier, our kids are taking these tests right now. Actually, today, all 3 of my kids were taking these tests. Delaying these another 3 months just denies the public the knowledge of how their school districts are performing. Literally, by pushing these back, we will not get our test score results for 8 months after they take these tests. 8 months later, that renders them almost useless. There could have been so much intervention done in those 8 months to correct course, change direction if needed. Also, since 2004, MDE every year has met this deadline. 2 decades they have been able to meet this deadline. We heard in committee that it might take longer, it's too fast, they can't do it. For 20 years, they've been able to do this. And with advances in technology, you think that this would be getting easier. They should probably be able to do it quicker. In addition to that, I'm concerned that this could be perceived as intentionally delaying these results. Perhaps we don't want the public to know how our schools are doing. Since 2019, when Governor Walz took office, our reading proficiency has gone down by 16%. Math proficiency is down 17%. And our science proficiency is down 23%. We have a major crisis. Pushing back the public release of these scores doesn't help our students. This isn't going to benefit our schools. We must make this a priority. The sooner we get these results to the public, the sooner we get these results to parents, the better. The quicker we can provide intervention if needed, and the sooner we can change course. Our school administrators, our educators, our parents are working together in our communities, and they can improve our student performances. But when they're not provided the information, when the information is hidden from them, they're not able to do that. We're simply prolonging the problem and, quite frankly, promoting more of the same. We cannot allow these test scores, the release of these test scores, to be pushed back any further. Oh, and I request a roll call.
Representative Knudsen requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Discussion to the Knudsen A12 amendment. The member from Hennepin, Representative Pryor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On this amendment, well, I first want to go back to what we've already adopted tonight, which is certainly these test scores as they relate to an individual student, as that student's score could be revealed to the or told to the parent at an earlier date. We do have the language to make sure that that is clear that that can happen. So that's not an issue that we're addressing, we'll be addressing now, because we do have the language to make sure that can continue to happen. Then the other part is the aggregate scores that reflect the performance of the school, really is what we're looking at with these MCA. So what you have is not these individual scores, but all of the scores rolled up together. And as we heard in the testimony from the Department of Education, there's been some issues with getting, both making sure that they had the accurate information, verified information, and also that they were able to report it in a way that is most useful to folks, and that they're finding that the timeline, that earlier timeline, just wasn't working as they worked with school districts to gather this information. So I think that I think that we should stick with the original bill and stick with the original timeline. I don't think that there's a value to our public, and certainly not to an individual family, because that problem has already been addressed tonight. So I think that this is not one that I would like to accept. Thank you.
The member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And back when I was on the school board, just slightly after the turn of the century, Byron was one of the first districts in the state to add some adaptive testing, and testing that we got the results within days, and we were able to give that to the teachers, the students, and we were able to responsively fix and improve and take care of things instead of after the fact. The other thing that helped us do is it helped us with community, parents and others volunteering to tutor and assist, and that partnership has helped our school to do very well compared to the state average. I'm surprised if I heard correctly the statement that, well, we already got the early release information to parents and that, but the department feels they need the extra time to release it because of concerns about accuracy and et cetera. Well, if it's inaccurate and we can't trust it and we need extra months to verify and check, then why are we giving inaccurate, unverified, bad information early to parents? I mean, it doesn't make sense. We need to more quickly, besides getting the schools and the teachers and the students and the parents informed, we need to get the community informed so they can step up and help. And that's what's worked down in my part of the state, is by the buy-in of the community involvement, helping where we need help, whether it's reading, math, et cetera, and delaying by months is not the right thing. And if the reason for delaying is inaccurate, unverified, we really need to fix something if those statements are true. So we need this amendment, and please vote green.
The member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, please support the Knudsen amendment. It is really essential to get this data out. And you are telling me that kids are taking these tests right now in April and they can't get the data out in this digital technological age? They can't get accurate data out by September? This information should be out before school starts, in my opinion. The Department of Education is the Department of Education. This is should be one of their top priorities. They have to post this stuff publicly so parents can decide, hey, do I want to send my kid into this school district? Because look at what we've got. We've got reading proficiency down 16% under the Walz administration, math proficiency down 17%, science proficiency down 23%, consistent attendance at just 69.8%, and graduation rates are stagnant at 83%, and in some districts we know what that's like. So this is an administrative problem. The Walz administration needs to make it a priority. Tell his own department, get these test results out, get them accumulated, check them for your accuracy. It doesn't take 4 months. This is a matter of priorities. This is absolutely ridiculous that we would move this data out, especially past an election. Vote green on the Knutson amendment.
Discussion to the amendment. The member from Scott, Representative Bakeberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We had a good discussion about this in committee, and one of the things that really jumped out to me when I read this this proposal to move the date from October to December, let that sink in. So right now, kids across Minnesota, our kids in all of our districts, are taking the MCA assessments. Now, keep in mind, that is one data point that school districts use. Okay, a school district doesn't make a decision based off of just the MCA assessments. It's one data point, but it's an important data point. So they're taking the assessments right now, and the department is proposing and asking, let's not give that school-wide information until December. Would any of us, if we walked into the doctor and took a test in the doctor's office, and the doctor said, ooh, got some red flags here, I'll tell you in 6 months. We would never allow that. That is illogical. And what really struck me is I was on a call with principals last October, and the overwhelming consensus from it was assessment people in districts, so it wasn't just administrators. There were teachers, administrators, and we were asking for that school-wide data earlier. Give it to us in July. Because what happens in school districts, every one of them that I've been in, we have a data meeting in the fall prior to our staff coming back so that we can look at school-wide trends, look at patterns, so then we can plan accordingly to meet the needs of our kids in the community. I am grateful, Chair Pryor, that you took the amendment for individual families. That is a good first step. This is the next step to empower school districts to be able to utilize this data point in conjunction with other data points. The other thing that jumped out to me, when we were in committee, the department literally said in committee, we are in the process of staffing up. Let that sink in. The department is in the process of staffing up. Rep. Knutson said it well. There's never been an issue in my 20-plus years of education where we haven't got the data. I was the district assessment coordinator. I did the data verification for my district. That was almost 20 years ago, to be honest. But let that sink in. The department is staffing up to be able to fill all of the positions that they got last year. And I know one of my school districts is cutting just under $5 million. We don't have to bow to the whims of the department. We can hold their feet to the fire and say, nope, this is bad policy. Get your job done. And if you can't do that, then maybe we need new people in those positions. Vote green.
Further discussion to the A12 amendment? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Will the clerk please call the name of the member voting remotely?
Daniels.
Daniels votes aye.
Daniels votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 62 ayes and 69 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Knutson moves to amend Senate File Number 3567, the second engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A19.
The member from Cass, Representative Knutson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, the A19 amendment, we touched on this a little bit with Bakeberg's amendment, and I'm so thankful that that did pass, because now schools will know, and it will be crystal clear that they can provide parents with the score of their child's assessment. What this amendment does is it requires MDE to provide parents or guardians with the statewide assessment results before for their child before the end of the year, with clear explanation of whether their child is meeting or not meeting state standards. Members, we are at a crossroads here with education. I'm going to say it again. Since 2019, we have seen our reading proficiency go down 16%. Math proficiency is down 17%. And science proficiency is down 23%. If we're not communicating this to our parents, parents aren't going to know that their child needs help. We have to empower our parents by having the department provide this information with a clear explanation of whether their child is meeting or not meeting state standards. Parents will be able to spend the summer intervening for their child, getting them the remedial help and the tutoring that they may need. We already know that there is a learning loss during the summer. However, that learning loss might start well before summer does. But parents aren't going to know that unless we're providing them with that information. Too often, our parents are under the mistaken or false impression that everything is just fine in school. Everything is just fine with their child's education. And they learn too late, the fall, after a whole summer of lost time, that their children aren't performing at grade level in math, that they're not performing at grade level in reading. If a child can't read, a child can't learn. We need to empower our parents to help their students. And Madam Speaker, I request a roll call.
Representative Knudsen requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Discussion to the amendment. The member from Hennepin, Representative Pryor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think, again, that we had a good amendment that was introduced earlier in the bill and addresses, I believe, the underlying issue here, knowing also that that direct communication between the classroom teacher, the administrators, the support personnel in the school is the best way to hear about a student's progress. And I think that, that it's a more effective, that system and that dependency right now would be the relationships that we want to support for supporting students that may be falling behind in their coursework. So I would recommend a no vote on this amendment.
Further discussion to the amendment. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Will the clerk please call the name of the member who is voting remotely?
Daniels.
Daniel votes aye.
Daniels votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 61 ayes and 70 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Mueller moves to amend Senate File number 3567, the second engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A15.
The member from Mauer, Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This is an amendment that is vitally important to those of us who live out in the rural areas. And so I really want to be able to talk about the short call substitute pilot. And since the moment I was elected, this has been a passion of mine, knowing that substitute teaching, with such a big lack that we saw just desperate needs of our classrooms needing substitute teachers, and there was many barriers for them to be able to get into the classrooms. About 5 years ago, my district created a substitute teaching training and asked that they would have a little bit more autonomy and more flexibility on who they could hire for substitute teachers. There was a lot of discussion about that during my first term, and then in the second term, MDE kind of took the bill and moved it a little bit around and decided that in 2023 we passed a version of my bill, but instead it had just a little bit of tweaks. One of the things that was on there that makes it very unusable for us in the rural areas is the mandate that you have to, in order to participate in the pilot, that you have to pay your substitute teachers $200 a day. Now, I have said this multiple times. We cannot value our substitute teachers enough. We cannot value them enough, knowing that they're coming into a situation that is very difficult, oftentimes not knowing the kiddos right away. But this being able to mandate this $200 almost made all of my schools unable to be a part of the pilot program. They wanted to be able to be a part of it, knowing that they had more access to people, that there was a broader pool that they could choose from, knowing that they'd have more autonomy to be able to hire some people from the community that may later on become teachers themselves, but they just weren't able to have the $200 a day. So what ended up happening was that I worked with Pelsby and with MSBA and some other of the advocacy groups and came up with a language that you see before you today. And this one, this language here that has been approved by Pelsby, approved by MSBA, which this is one of their #1 priorities, is to have this change so that we can see this pilot program even expanded into more areas, because they are seeing some good results with it. And this just says that either the same rate of pay as other short call substitute teachers in the school district or the charter school, or the employee's existing rate of pay, whichever is greater. Also, what was different in committee is what I have here is that it would extend the pilot to 2027. And the reason we want to extend the pilot is because, we are seeing, what I heard in committee was, this pilot is just about done. So let's just let it run its course and see if it's working. Well, we're not actually going to see it work correctly because we're seeing so many people not be a part of it that we're not going to get accurate data. So by actually extending the pilot another couple years, we will be able, and changing this so that they don't have to have the $200 a day, we'll actually be able to see accurate data from all around the state that allows each school to participate and be a part of this expanded pool. So with that, Madam Speaker, I'd like to request a roll call.
Representative Mueller requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Mueller.
Thank you, and I would encourage a green vote.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Joachim.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Mueller, for all the work your school district did on this. We've talked about it a lot. Folks should know that a short call sub can only work 15 consecutive days in one district, and you can get that license. I just got mine this year with a BA and a background check. And you're proving that you have your BA. So you can do that and get paid whatever the district sets, or as Representative Mueller said, we tried the short call sub license to see if we could get more people into the schools and interested, where you're required only to have an associate's degree or an equivalent, and then also you could have a high school diploma or equivalent and have been employed in the district for a year. But that person could only still work 15 days at a time, and not only 15 consecutive days and then take a break. So I know part of your amendment is to extend this pilot 1 more year, actually 2 more years, which I think we'd have to have a lot more discussion on in committee. And the $200 was a way to entice folks in this very tight job market to come into our schools. I just was looking online at jobs in rural Minnesota. Walmart up in Pine City, $20 for a cashier. So you could get a full-time job at $20 with benefits, or you could go in for 15 days in a row and that's it. But that's what the enticement was with the $200. So this pilot project has 1 more year. We'll see the data and see if this worked. And I would ask for a no vote.
Further discussion to the Mueller amendment. Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members. Thank you, Chair Joachim, for your comments. I just want to be able to explain, when we have the expanded pool and how it's supposed to attract more people, you said twice that you can only work 15 days. That's 15 days in one classroom. And that means that after 15 days, if you're in one classroom, you now have to be able to be certified and licensed in that classroom, because now you are no longer a short call substitute teacher, you're a long-term substitute teacher. And so it's actually pretty uncommon for a short call sub to be in the same class for 15 consecutive days, but it is very common for them to be called every day because we need so many short call substitute teachers. So that in itself is not really a concern. If you're talking about Walmart paying $20 an hour with benefits, and so we need to be able to attract short call substitute teachers, there's a slight difference here. Walmart will give you a schedule and you have to show up every single day or you lose your job. A short call substitute teacher, they get to decide their schedule. They can get called and say, hey, we desperately need a short call sub, and you say, listen, my kid is sick, I can't go in today. Guess what? You don't lose your job to come in tomorrow if you are available. The beauty of a substitute teacher, a short call substitute teacher, is that you have flexibility with your schedule. You are able to say, no, I'm sorry, I'm busy today, then I need to be able to be with my family, or I have other commitments. But I guarantee you that if a short call substitute teacher, especially one that is able to go to multiple districts, they're able to get a job every single day. Every day. I am during my, when I'm not working as a legislator and when I'm not doing legislative duties during the interim, I work as a substitute teacher. And I can work pretty much every day because I can go to not only Austin, but I can go to the surrounding school districts that definitely need to have more availability of short call substitute teachers. So thank you, Representative Joachim, for your comments. Something that still we need to be able to have this amendment. Because while you were talking about, oh, they can only work 15 days, or oh, look, they can get better pay at Walmart. Well, again, that's not the actual, job of a short call substitute teacher. There is different reasons for the way that it is, and for us to entice more people to be able to be a part of this pilot program, we are keeping people out of the pilot by having this mandate of $200 a day. Please, Madam Speaker and members, please vote green.
Further discussion to the A15 amendment. Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Will the clerk please call the member who's voting remotely?
Daniels.
Daniels votes aye.
Daniels votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 61 ayes and 69 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Mueller moves to amend Senate File number 3567, the second engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A20.
The member from Mauer, Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. And before I forget, I'd like to request a roll call.
Representative Mueller requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I'd like to just start before I go into this amendment. I'd like to just draw attention to the button that I'm wearing today. The button that I'm wearing today is called Education is Freedom. Education is freedom, and we know how important it is for our schools to be educating our students. One of the core tenets of being a teacher and one of the core tenets of education is reading and making sure that we are actually teaching our children to know how to read, because literacy is learning. When you know how to read, you learn to read, you then read to learn. And it's important to have that fundamental skill in order to read. So what we're doing in this is that we are taking the READ Act and we're just giving it a little polish. We started this really amazing bill, and we're just polishing it up a little bit. The amendment have a couple of things that I want to explain. In it, we unequivocally stand with the science of reading. Now, before people get all weirded out, I want you to be able to actually look at the amendment. It's right in front of you. The pages we're able to give you, or I apologize. Our staff was able to give us all of the amendment right in front of you. If you look, the only thing that I've changed in here is that evidence-based or science of reading is in the amendment, and that we are saying that we are using curriculum that is holding fast to the science of reading, that we are updating the definition of science-based reading research and what that means, but the rest of the language is the same. And the reason why it's so important for us to update this is because it's important to us to have unambiguous language, because ambiguity here leads to ambiguity in how we train our teachers and how we teach our students. So we need to make sure that there is no ambiguity in here. I'd like to point out that I again went and reviewed all of the legislation that has been passed in the last, 10 years here, and it has updated for 23 as well. And states that say the science of reading is 13. They actually say the science of reading in there is 13, including places like Indiana, Maryland, Missouri, Ohio, Utah, Wisconsin, Colorado. And what's so important about Ohio being someone that's going to hold fast and literally say science of reading is because Ohio is literally the birthplace of reading recovery, the birthplace of the idea of balanced literacy, whole literacy, the 3 cueing system. They started it there in Ohio, and Ohio has now done a 180 and said it is important enough to not just use evidence-based, they say science of reading. And so I think if the place that actually started, that brought reading recovery to the United States, if they can do the 180 and say, we're gonna say science of reading, I think we can too. This improves the evidence-based definition in the READ Act to ensure the evidence is based on the science of reading. It restores the requirement and expectation of our elementary teachers to have, who have a primary role in reading, who teach reading, to have skills in the science of reading. And as more places are finding that we need to have more rigorous testing, there's lots of states that are choosing to update their tests because they know that when they're able to see the results of these tests, they are able to ensure that their teachers are taught in the science of reading and that they'll be able to be effective in the classroom. And then the last two here is it requires the teacher preparation program, preparing teachers, that Pelsby will do an audit on them to make sure that they are teaching teachers in the science of reading. And finally, it allows school boards, and this is so important, it allows school boards to create an urgency that basically says there is a reading crisis, there's a literacy crisis. So by declaring an urgency that we are going to only meet the READ Act and work on that and and then have a moratorium on the rest of the standards, we are able to focus on the true thing that they should be focusing on right now, which is literacy. Remember, you've heard it so many times from my colleagues that literacy is learning. And in the last time since the Governor Walz has taken office, our reading scores are down 16%. 16%. We need to make sure that our students and our teachers are trained in the science of reading. And so I want to make sure that we are going to update, polish what was started, and that we are not having any ambiguous language. Because when we refuse to say the science of reading, we refuse to believe and implement the science of reading. Please vote green.
Discussion to the amendment. The member from Hennepin, Representative Edelson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Mueller, thank you. So I'll just tell you, READ Act needs no polishing up. It doesn't. I think it's pretty shiny already, which is why we have 25,000 teachers that have signed up just this year. 25,000 teachers excited about doing the READ Act. So do you know what happens if you change structure literacy and the science of reading, do you know if you swap those two, what would happen? Absolutely nothing. It's literally the same thing. You say potato, I say potato. In both instances, you know what it is? It's a vegetable. So it's a starchy vegetable, but it's a vegetable. So literacy is learning, which is why we invested last year $92 million, record funds for the state of Minnesota in literacy. We tackled it. We do swiping literacy reform, and we're going to continue that work. The reading audit that you're asking for is great, and it's in Read Act 2.0. That was my idea. Thank you. But I will say this. Getting rid of suspending all things, everything else, just so we can do reading alone, I think we can do more than that. And I just want to remind the body what we did last year, because there's some good stuff here. Recess for all, reducing suspensions, access to menstrual products, unemployment benefits for our bus drivers and cafeteria staff. Let's suspend that. I don't think so. Ethnic studies for our kids so that we can learn about each other. Suicide prevention, universal meals. Thank you, Representative Jordan. I'm pretty sure one of the things that most people are excited about are many of the things in here. It's not just reading. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. Vote no.
Further discussion to the Mueller amendment. The member from Scott, Representative Bakeberg.
Well, I would love to talk about what happened last year, but it's getting late. So I will just highlight a couple of the provisions from the GOP bill that was offered. 5 and 5 on the formula. 5 and 5. What was passed was 4 and 2 on the formula. Overwhelmingly, what I heard from school districts was get out of our way, fund us, give us funding, give us flexibility, and get out of our way. I'm Representative Edelson. I have said publicly multiple places, the work you've done on the READ Act, you've done a good job with that. But to say that it needs no polishing, you and I both know that's not true, because we have talked extensively to educators across the state that have widespread concerns about different items within the READ Act. One of the concerns, the main concern, is fund it. The GOP bill had $250 million for the READ Act. Because I see that bill, we see that as an investment in infrastructure, similar to roads and bridges. So that would be one way to polish it up. But I rise not to talk about that or talk about last year. We'll do that in a little bit when we talk about mandates. But I want to support Representative Mueller's amendment for 2 reasons. So there are pieces in there that talk about teacher prep programs using the science of reading. And you use potato, but that's not what's translating out in real world. Because just in case you don't know, this isn't real world. What actually happens in our schools is different. And the other piece is a Pellsby audit of our teacher prep programs. This is critical. These 2 components are critical because 2 examples for you. The first one is I was having a conversation with a leader, the head of a teacher prep program, just this fall. And she said, Ben, I'm here to tell you that depending on the teacher prep program, some of them are saying, we're not doing the science of reading because they have different biases against the words. So they're not doing that. What that means then, the teachers that I hire, that principals hire, will not be trained. They will not be trained in the science of reading. So then that falls on our local school district, and that investment that we did, we had $250 million, $90 million, just to since you brought it up, Representative Edelson. The other thing is, I was going through my email, my school district email, and I got this email, and it was weird. It was about a professional development training opportunity, and the name reminded me of something. Well, it was one of the people that is very, very outspoken against the science of reading. He is now going around the state marketing himself to do professional development training. And he will undercut all of the work that you've done, Representative Edelson, if we are not clear and explicit. Professional development matters. We need to make sure that our teacher prep programs are preparing our kids, our teacher candidates accurately so that when they get into the classroom, they are trained, and then when then they're getting ongoing professional development that is high quality. The mandate, the suspension of the non-literacy mandates, we heard that over and over from districts. Please, please give us some relief of the over 65 mandates. And I've also heard that, well, mandates are actually accountability for taxpayer dollars. I'm glad we're talking about accountability finally. But there's a locally elected group that knows what is needed in St. Peter much better than we do. They're called a school board. Let's get out of the way and empower them to support their needs, because the needs of St. Peter are different than the needs of St. Paul. Let's allow our local school boards the autonomy to make the decisions by backing off some of the mandates. Please vote yes for the Mueller amendment.
Discussion. The member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I was surprised about the belittling of reading. It is the key thing, because if they can't read, it's detrimental in all the other subjects as they move through school. I've been involved with several dozen different schools in 3 different states, corporate, community, and other programs, school board. The ZED board had several schools working together for special ed, special needs. The one thing that I learned is that children are individuals. Communities are different. And if you come up with lists of mandates that might work great in a portion of the schools, they don't allow the local districts to do what is needed for their students, both the individual and at community level, and at the variation between school to school. That's what is important, is delivering the capability to do the options that work. And the comment about mandates, I've got the least funded per pupil school district I live in, used to be on the school board. I've got several schools in my district that are in the bottom 10. In fact, several that are in the bottom 5 per pupil funded. But they also, graduation 100%, 5 schools, additional schools above 90%. The reading at grade level is above 50%. At math, what they do is address what's needed. They adapt. If they've got a class, a grade level, that needs more work on a portion, a subject or a portion of a subject, they address that. But I also have heard from all these districts that the amount of money given last year, this big pot of money, 1.5 to 2.5 times that is being spent on doing the mandates, so they are losing on their budget. They're cutting things on their budget because they have less money to use. And what we don't hear is the mandates take up class time, and that's almost more precious than the funds, because you need the class time to teach the students the skills they need. And if they cannot read, they are so handicapped. So prioritizing reading, I know very few people involved in the schools around my area, the successful schools too, that don't believe reading is at the top if they're going to be pushing knowledge. And I had years of being involved with special ed, tutoring, and team teaching to help the students that are having problems with this subject and that subject. I've seen a lot of different models utilized. And that is how we empower success in our schools. Empower the school boards, the local leaders, the teachers to options to do what is best. Empower and engage the parents and the community to be involved. Success means giving the students the skills and capabilities to pursue their dreams and goals in life. And one of the things that is key in that is reading. So I am surprised at some of the discussion here on the floor, because I've seen a lot of success. And bragging about some of the stuff done last year, which my teachers, school boards, and administration are telling me is detrimental. We've got to come to reality. And this amendment is a great step towards that reality. Thank you.
The member from Freeborn, Representative Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, when I was in college, I played softball, and I remember our coach for the young women who kept missing the ball when they were up there with their bat. Our coach would say, "Keep your eye on the ball. Keep your eye on the ball." Representative Edelson, I know that we have very talented staff, teachers, administrators in our schools that can walk and chew gum at the same time. But it's kind of difficult to keep your eye on 65 balls at one time. You can't do that. I remember as a teacher trying to incorporate these mandates that would come down from the state, and every time it's staff development time before and after school. It's meeting during our prep time for our grade levels to try to figure out how we're going to incorporate this new mandate into our classrooms. It takes time. Our teachers and administrators and staff only have so much bandwidth, and that's time. And so if they're focusing on all 65 mandates, which they have to right now, then they don't have time for the key skill of focusing on literacy. And as we've said here, literacy is learning. And if a child can't read, a child can't learn. They're not going to learn the ethnic studies. They're not going to read the sign in the boys' bathroom that says, "Don't play with these products, they're not toys." They're not going to be able to read anything. So literacy is learning, literacy is important. We should allow these schools that want to declare this urgency to do so, focus on reading, keep their eye on the ball.
Discussion to the A20 amendment. Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members. Representative Edelson, thank you for your points. Unfortunately, as you were sharing your response to my amendment, I noticed a couple of very glaring errors. You said it doesn't need polishing, but yet we're going to continue to work on it, and I have a bill 3744 of your Reading Reset or Reading Act 2.0. Not quite sure how it works to not need polishing, but yet you need a new bill. Number two, we invest over $90 million. How much of that money actually went to the classroom? If I remember right, that would be 30, maybe a little more, as the rest of it went to carry. And number three, wherever I'm at, number three, 25,000 teachers signed up. It's a mandate. Of course they did. It's a mandate. They have to. So, yeah, of course we have a lot of teachers. The school district is working their tails off trying to get their teachers trained because they're mandated to do it. So, yay. Good. What I'm saying here now is it's not a vegetable. It's not a vegetable. It's the foundation on how we learn. If you want equity, you want to make sure that all of our kids can make sure that they're going to succeed in life, we need to teach them how to read. And we decided that we're going to make this amazing investment, and all of us agree that. All I'm saying is that if this is really important as you say it is, it doesn't mean that the mandates go away, the other 64 bazillion that you passed last time would go away. It just means we're delayed, and that we get to focus on what is important right now, which is literacy. They want to do this. Our schools want to do this, but I have heard so many times that they don't have the money to do it, they don't have the time to do it, and they don't have the clarity on how they're supposed to do it. Seems pretty amazing to me that as we talk about bipartisanship, don't need polishing from the minority party because apparently you already have all the answers. Vote green.
Further discussion on the 820 amendment. Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Will the chief clerk please call the name of the member who's voting remotely?
Daniels.
Daniels votes yes.
Daniels votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 61 ayes and 69 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Mueller moves to amend Senate File number 3567, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A23.
The member from Mauer, Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members. Well, let's try this one more time. Promise you this is the last of my amendments, so let's just try it one more time. This amendment, we're going to pull it out of the previous amendment because it is that important. In my previous amendment of Amendment A20 that included the polishing that apparently doesn't need to be done on the READ Act, it included declaring an urgency that would allow school boards to put a pause on the rest of the mandates and only focus on the science of reading. Because this is so important, I'm going to ask that you get to vote on this separately, that you get to stand up and for your local school districts, and you get to say, listen, we've heard you. We know that you are, that there is a lot of pressure on you right now, that there's so much going on with 65 new mandates, that even with historic investments, that we had historic mandates that cost historic amount of money. And so even though all of that is happening, that we have heard that you want time, you want space, you want to prioritize reading, you want a little bit of focus. So I'm giving you another chance. Another chance to vote for your local school districts. Another chance to be able to say, I appreciate local control and I appreciate that you're asking me for a little bit more time. The A23, this amendment allows school districts to essentially declare a literary crisis and prioritize new requirements relating to the READ Act. In declaring an urgency, the school district can suspend the new non-literacy related requirements imposed by the 2023 session, and they can then pick them back up in 27. We've heard several times that during the 23 session, the trifecta has, under one-party control, has decided to give our school district an unprecedented amount of mandates. And while we understand that we may differ a little bit on the READ Act, if we're going to implement it and we're going to implement it with fidelity, then let's make sure that our school districts have the time, the space, the resources to do that well. So, Madam Speaker, I would ask for a roll call, please.
Representative Mueller requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We can take a moment and appreciate that there is a bipartisan agreement that literacy is important. And if that is a bipartisan thing, then we need to stand up for our school districts right now and let them implement the READ Act with fidelity and focus on what is the most important part, which is teaching our teachers how to read instruction and teaching our students how to read. Please vote green.
Discussion to the amendment. The member from Hennepin, Representative Pryor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, I don't know how this happened. we do have a bill on the floor today that's worked this year, but we're spending a lot of time talking about things that we worked on and passed last year. So I guess that's where we are right now, because that's what the amendment says. So I'll talk about some of the things that we did last year and why they were important and why suspending them, which means delaying. So another kid graduates from another grade, another senior leaves the classroom without some things that we did pass last year. So that's what this amendment is about, and that's what I will address now. Some of the work that we did last year was about recruiting and retaining really great people in our classrooms. We wanted training for paraprofessionals, and we mandated that. We also said that we need to pay these people, including unemployment, and we funded that. And these are the hourly workers that we want to retain through the summer so they'll come back in the fall because they know our kids. We want them to come back. We want them to retain. So there's work that we did about retaining the people that work with our kids. And that was in last year's bill. Then we did another group of things. And the first one I'm going to mention is on a different plane, and it is a serious one. We mandated opiate antagonists to be in the school buildings. And just today in Human Services, we talked about the number of people in Hennepin County that were dying from overdoses. And it's happening with young people too. So it's a requirement, it's a mandate, and we shouldn't suspend that. We should get that out as quickly as possible, and our schools can do this. They can do this. We have a policy about schools need to adopt a policy to address malicious and sadistic conduct. I have grandchildren, sorry. my children's children that are in middle school right now. I don't want to suspend this policy. I want them to be protected from malicious and sadistic conduct in their schools, and I want their classmates to be protected too, because we know it's not my grandkids that are likely to be targets of this. Our schools can do this now. We don't have to suspend it, and it's not the issue for this bill. We're celebrating Indigenous people. There are children that walked across the graduation platform with a feather that symbolized their culture. We required that last year, that they be permitted to do it. We also required civics to be taught to students when they're seniors or juniors so that they know when they're ready to vote why their participation is important. And that was a bill that had a lot of support from a lot of members. We don't need to suspend that and wait longer for a group of kids to have that opportunity when it will make the most amount of difference. We also required literacy, a different kind of literacy, financial literacy. Because we know with everything that's going on with, you can buy things with your phone just by rubbing a code on something. Kids need that foundation. We can't wait for another group of young people to leave the classroom without knowing it. And again, this was something that had bipartisan support. And of course, we passed and required and mandated literacy to be taught the most effective way to all of our students, because that's what we do. We know that we have to respond to the needs of the day, and that's our job. And we don't neglect it. We don't say, oh, someone else was going to do it. These are problems we don't have to worry about. But we come together as a body from all sides of the aisle to contribute to this and do the things that we will know that will make a difference for our students. And we do them as quickly and efficiently as we can, because every student we change, every student we improve their educational experience for is better for it. And we try to put deadlines that made sense, that can be adopted at our local level. We made an adjustment with the civics because we tried to roll it out too fast, and that's what this is in this bill, not last bill, when we do get to this bill. But that's what we do, and that's why it's important. So vote no.
Further discussion. The member from Scott, Representative Bakeberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make sure that we understand the actual bill that we're talking about and the language in the bill. And we could walk through all 65-plus mandates and talk about the value of all of those, but I don't think anyone in this body wants to do that, or do we want to go back and re-legislate? But I would challenge us to think about, since we adjourned last spring, I have heard nothing but give us relief from the mandates. That has been the biggest thing. What Mueller's amendment does, there's a word in there that, frankly, we didn't use very often last year. There's a word in there, and it says may. What that word does is it gives local control to the local school district to say, hey, we want to adopt this policy. And they could go through and they could decide what they want to keep and what they want to not focus on. Because for anyone that has been in a school, you understand that the pace is very rapid. So there's not a lot of time built in for professional development. So they have to find nooks and crannies within their day to do PD. So this is releasing some of the burden that from Republican districts, from Democrat districts, overwhelmingly, please give us some relief from the mandates. Some of them, they're good. I voted for some of them. But we have to allow for some flexibility, and we have to respect our local school districts and empower them so that they can innovate. Chair Pryor, you talked about malicious and sadistic conduct. And anyone would agree that harming someone with harmful intent, being malicious, and then deriving pleasure, sadistic, that is sick. But guess what? Schools don't need this body to tell them to stop that. We're good. We've been doing it for years, and when every single person in this body was a student, or those of you that worked in schools or served on school boards, if that happened, it's addressed. We don't need the Minnesota legislature to say, hey, don't have malicious and sadistic conduct. And to even imply that we need to do that is extremely concerning. Vote green, and when you do that, you are trusting your local school boards, your local school districts to make the decisions that are best for them. Vote green.
Discussion on the 823 amendment. Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members, for this discussion. And I'd just like to again address some of the things that we heard from the Chair of Education. Don't know how it happened, but we're talking about something that all the things that we did last year. Well, what happened is that we listened to school districts. We listened to school districts, and they told us, please help us. That's how this happened. In a second year of a biennium, you're supposed to be able to kind of have a time of looking at, okay, what happened? Let's tweak policy, let's do bonding, let's give a small supplemental budget, and then let's get out. So that's how this happened, is that we listened to schools. That's why this is here. The other statement that you said is that we don't shirk our responsibility. We don't just say, hey, here this is, now you go and do it. Actually, that's exactly what we do when we have mandates. When we give mandates, we're not the ones implementing them. The schools are. So yeah, that's exactly what we do. And that's why they're the ones who are telling us, we need a pause. We need a moment. We need some space. And it doesn't say that they can't do some of those mandates there. It says that they're not mandated to do them right now. We give deadlines so that that makes sense. Okay, but we're listening to the boots on the ground saying, help. That's what we're doing here. We're just listening to the boots on the ground saying, help. It doesn't get rid of the mandates. It doesn't devalue the mandates. It doesn't say that what you are talking about isn't important, because all those things that you talked about in your response are important. It just says, wait, and it just says, we as our local school board, we're gonna be able to, okay, we're gonna focus on reading, and then we're gonna look at what's feasible to do now and work our way through it. I'm giving you that chance. You voted against my last amendment in A20 that included this part, and that's okay. I'm giving you another chance to stand up for your local school district and give them a break, give them a space, give them some time. Madam Speaker and members, please vote green.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Will the clerk please call the name of the member who's participating remotely?
Daniels.
Daniels votes aye.
Daniels votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 60 ayes and 70 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Kresha moves to amend Senate File number 3567, the second engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A10.
The member from Morrison, Representative Kresha.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. The amendment repeals the ethnic studies requirement, and the language that we're striking simply says an ethnic studies course may fulfill a social studies, language arts, math or arts or science credit. That in itself doesn't seem to make sense. Let's let a math course stand on its own and not find political ways to change that curriculum. So with this amendment, I'm simply asking that we repeal that and put that back into the hands of local social studies teachers. And with that, I would ask for a green vote on the amendment.
Discussion to the amendment. The member from Hennepin, Representative Sencer-Murra.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would encourage a no vote on this or a red vote. This body last year passed an incredibly important piece of legislation that young people from across our state have been asking for years, which is to say we want a curriculum that we can see ourselves. We want to be seen in the classroom. I can tell you that I was the lead author for this bill, and I have had students from districts across the state come to me and say, thank you for passing that. Thank you for passing that for me. Thank you for passing for that for my younger siblings that will come after me. I don't feel seen in the classroom, and I think that this curriculum is one step forward to doing that. Just want to speak briefly to the flexibility that we gave districts by saying that an ethnic studies course could fit an English requirement, could fit a math requirement. We actually know that there are courses, and we know this from the course catalog, courses across our state that are already embedding ethnic studies into multiple departments, multiple kinds of classes, and so that's why we gave districts the flexibility that we are asking for. So please, members, vote no on this. We don't want to go backwards. We want to meet our students where they're at and keep this incredibly important piece of our curriculum that students across our state will have access to. Thank you.
Discussion. The member from Wright, Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, deja vu. Here we are again, talking about ethnic studies. You know, there's been a lot of chatter in this chamber over the past year and a half that we first termers have been here about the importance of democracy. It's oh so important that we echo the voice of the people, that we provide access to those whom we represent, to the process, so that they understand what's going on and so they can vote accordingly, so that the government that we offer them is by the consent of the governed. The interesting thing about that is, if that was in fact the goal, one of the things that you would really try to do is be very specific and open with what it is that you're accomplishing with your legislation. Students want to be seen. That's what this does. Last year we talked about teaching history as if that's never happened before. You know, I'm probably the median age of everyone in this room, so a lot of us went to school decades ago. Did you not learn about Black history in school? Were you not taught about the Civil War? Were you not taught about Jim Crow? I was. Were you not taught Native studies? Taught about the tribes? Taught about treaties? All that stuff was in my social studies curriculum. South Washington County, Cottage Grove, Park Senior High. I don't know, maybe they were ahead of the curve, but we learned that. This isn't about history. It's not about being seen. What it's about, and look, we have the receipts, and I love this. I love the fact, one of the things we can all be proud of as Minnesotans and as Minnesotan legislators is that we have a fantastic legislative website where we can go back to the 90s, go back to when I was in school, and look at all the bills and all the committee meetings and all the floor sessions. But we don't have to go back that far. We'll go back last year. The fourth engrossment of this bill, where we ended up passing, we passed the fifth engrossment. The fourth engrossment, which was debated on this floor before it changed into the fifth, had this definition of anti-racist, which, just to provide some context, part of the purpose of ethnic studies is to be anti-racist. This is how it was defined in the fourth engrossment of the bill. Anti-racist means actively working to identify and eliminate racism in all its forms so that power and resources are redistributed and shared equitably among racial groups. Now, I cited that last year, much as I just did now. And I don't know for sure, and I can't speak to motive, that's against our rules, but it is interesting that by the time we got to the fifth engrossment, which is the one you passed, that definition changed. Anti-racist in the law that was passed means actively working to identify and eliminate racism in all its forms, so far the same, in order to change policies, behaviors, and beliefs that perpetuate racist ideas and actions. Much more gentle, easier to swallow, easier to accept. But the intent of the fourth engrossment survived the process. How do we know? Well, because we can read what you're doing. We can read the social studies standards. One person who's read them is Catherine Kirsten, former Star Tribune columnist, writing for the Federalist. She writes, "To see what's coming, look at Minnesota, where this spring," this is in October of 2023 that she's writing this, "lawmakers enacted what are likely the most radical education measures in the nation. This is ethnic studies in its liberated form, which not only teaches race-based identities and white privilege, but incites students to take action to disrupt and dismantle America's fundamental social and political institutions." That sounds awfully political, don't you think? How is that an educational goal? Our educational goal in the state of Minnesota is to disrupt and dismantle our institutions? Minnesota's new K through 12 social studies standards exemplify this ideology. The standards add ethnic studies to the core social studies disciplines of history, civics, economics, and geography, and incorporates its concepts throughout. One ethnic studies anchor standard is titled Resistance. Resistance. We're going to teach our kids to resist. Resist what? America? Their country? Their state? Their mom? Their dad? Their neighbor? Their employer? Who are they resisting? Who are you teaching our kids to resist in the state of Minnesota? It requires students to, quote, organize with others to resist systemic and coordinated exercise of power. There's that word, power. Took it out of the statute, took it out of the bill, but it sure is still in the instruction manual for all the teachers, ain't it? Against marginalized and oppressed groups, these new standards and their related benchmarks prime youngsters to view American institutions with suspicion and hostility from the earliest grades. Kindergartners, for example, must retell a story about an unfair experience that conveys a power imbalance. 5-year-olds, folks. 5-year-olds. First graders must identify examples of ethnicity, equality, liberation, and systems of power, and use those examples to construct meanings for those terms. 6 years old. Goes on to say, the ethnic studies-driven campaign to discredit American institutions as illegitimate is most clearly evident in the standards that focus on criminal justice. This is my favorite part. Students will study our police departments and justice system in connection with an ethnic studies standard that requires them to, quote, understand the roots of contemporary systems of oppression and eliminate injustices. Fifth graders, for example, will examine contemporary policing and its alleged historical roots in early America, the claim is that our police departments spring directly from slave patrols of the Old South, and that's somehow relevant to today, to 2024. Sixth graders will study the impact of Minnesota's juvenile justice system on youth from historically disenfranchised groups. High school students suggest the notion of criminality itself is racist. Criminality itself is racist. That explains a lot. I sat on the Public Safety Committee. I've seen that yarn spun all day long. No wonder we're letting all the criminals out. No wonder one of the strategic goals of the Department of Corrections is zero warehousing, zero. Let them all out. Give them services. Offer a scholarship in criminality. Biased, misleading instruction of this kind will likely convince many young people that policing and the very idea of criminality are oppressive, racially constructed, and among the many things schools are instructing them to resist. Last year I talked about my personal experience, the fact that I come from a biracial family. I'm in a biracial family. I got biracial children. Since then, I've learned about all of your mixed race families. And I'm really excited about the fact that we exemplify the very dream that MLK got up on the National Mall and pointed towards. Little black kids and little white kids playing together, not thinking about each other's color. You talk about going backwards. This goes backwards. This goes backwards to a time when everyone was judged by the color of their skin. You're going to teach my sons to look upon half of their family with suspicion? To distrust police? To dismantle institutions? You're going to teach them that in school. Pretty silent. None of the usual paper ruffling conversations in the alcoves. I seem to have your attention. While Minnesota is paying attention. Madam Speaker, I'd like to request a roll call vote.
Representative Hudson requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Hudson.
Vote green in order to forestall this abuse of my children and yours and every child in the state of Minnesota.
Further discussion on the A10 amendment. Seeing no further discussion. Representative Kresha.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And just some closing comments on the amendment. So how do you follow that? I'll tell you how you follow that. Let's go a little bit further into what the ethnic studies mandate's roots really are. We came here earlier with a group that was outside the doors, Education for Liberation. Education for Liberation is who's pushing this. Let's go back to 2019 when they first filed and became an entity. And then in 2020, and a little later, they received a $35,000 grant from the Pelsby Board to do stipends for summer camps. Who is Education for Liberation? As Representative Hudson pointed out, it's a political organization. Those are not my words. If you go and you look at their website and you look at the curriculum they're pushing and the Education Liberation Network that they're part of and the coalition, and by the way, the coalition must be mandated as one of the individuals on the working group that Education for Liberation is part of. This all connects. So Education for Liberation has summer camps where they offer stipends to push their agenda. Again, these are not words that I've made up. These are the things that are right off of their website and the books they have. They're against SROs. They want to be a political force. Here's two books that they recommend. Palestine, a Socialist Indoctrination. Palestine. It should be indoctrination, but it's Palestine, a socialist introduction. The second book, BDS, The Global Struggle for Palestinian Rights. They come out anti-Zionist. If you look at their pictures of Israel, they're not pictures of Israel as a state, they're Israel as a socialist country. They do not want Israel, Jewish people, Christians to have a right to exist. It's off their website. It's groups like this that constantly, and these are not my words, this is somebody that was talking about them. It is groups like this that constantly put Jews and Christians into a position of proving they are not evil and have a right to exist. This is the curriculum that they want in our schools. I wish ethnic studies could be as simple as, yes, let's just learn about each other. But it's groups like this that are pushing these. Members, this amendment repeals the new ethnic studies course and instructional mandates enacted by the DFL majority last session. That is true. This repeals the working groups and stops radicals from moving into the classrooms. Representative Hudson illustrated that point about as well as I've ever heard. That's exactly what this is doing. This is not just about celebrating different cultures. This is not just about getting to know your neighbor from a different part of the world. This is about an organization that, by their own words, has said, we want to be political and change the status quo. That is their words. Members, there was an article in 2022 in the Minnesota Post. The article was entitled, Only Black Parents Can Close Minnesota's Achievement Gap. Members, we have reading scores at 49%, math scores still at 45%, 10 points lower than pre-pandemic levels. And we are offering not nice to have ethnic studies, political indoctrination and ideology in our classrooms. The author says, when we talk about the achievement gap, and by the way, the achievement gap is still there. Remember that thing we used to talk about? So from the article, according to Lee Hayes, for many, the answer to Minnesota's dirty little secret is having more black teachers in classrooms that students can readily identify and relate to culturally. After all, representation matters at all costs, right? That's how we can fix this problem, right? Maybe we can just culturally sensitize our way through this. But here's the bigger point. No, the most urgent right is that black students learn how to read, write, and do arithmetic at grade level and beyond, so that they are adequately prepared to become productive members of society, which includes being ready for today and tomorrow's technologically advanced workplace. Representative Hudson has it right on. He's not just arguing for his kids today, he's arguing for all kids' future. Members, our schools, our students, educators need to be focused on the problem at hand, the math and science and reading, not ideology and indoctrination. These new mandates around ethnic studies were among the large amount of new mandates that we've heard. We've heard in committee. A finance individual from a school district literally said, the mandates are torpedoes that we are trying not to let sink the ship. Most recently, I'm reading a book called The Ship of Ghosts about the USS Houston, who stumbled in World War II with the USS Perth into an armament of Japanese ships. And they fended off torpedoes one after another all night long until eventually the ship began to turn on its side. They couldn't tell up from down, and they sunk. And the sailors that were swimming were just trying to survive in the water. And that image is seared in my head when I hear our schools say, these mandates are like torpedoes we're waiting to fend off. I hear all the time, well, yes, we did some mandates. What's one we could take away? Here's one right now. Here's one we could take away and give back to our schools, local control. If Minneapolis and St. Paul school districts and Education for Liberation want to mandate ethnic studies for their own students, go right ahead. Leave the rest of the state alone. Leave the schools alone that have already said to us, I have qualified teachers and social studies teachers who can handle this. The number one thing I hear when I visit schools is, would you Suits in St. Paul quit sending us more stuff? This body should not be a state board of education. Members, you will never make Minnesota a better place to raise a family if the education agenda is to teach our kids to hate the state, to hate our country, and to hate each other. Members, please vote green on this amendment.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Sensor Mira.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I did just want to clarify one thing about Representative Krisha's amendment. So Representative Krisha's amendment attempts to do two things. It attempts to roll back the provision that we passed in the education bill last year that said that in the 25-26 school year, all high schools will have to offer an ethnic studies course. Separate from that is a process that does not have to do with this legislature, which is about standards making. And Representative Hudson walked us through some of the standards. Those were not created by this body. We do not create standards. That is a process that is separate. There was a working group that met many times. There was an administrative law judge that actually approved the standards, gave some feedback on changing one of them. Over 850 members of the public submitted comments on the first draft of the standards, 600 comments submitted on the second draft. 250 people attended the virtual public hearings in November 2023, and over 50 people spoke at those hearings. So passing Representative Krisha's amendment would be undoing the will of the people. And I also just want to speak to this argument that, and again, you know, we can walk and chew gum, that let's focus on the basics. Let's focus on reading. Let's focus on math. Ethnic studies is something that comes after, something extra. As part of the READ Act, we looked at different reading curriculums across the state. Representative Edelson had a working group that did this. They could not find one curriculum that did not show a racial bias. They could not find one curriculum that did not show people of color in an unfavorable light compared to white people. That is why we need ethnic studies. That is why we are looking at the curriculum. Thank you.
Representative Krisha.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And just quickly, rather than raise the point of germaneness, this is just on the ethnical studies mandate. And I would just simply say again, we will never make Minnesota a better place if we continue to put agendas that teach us to hate each other, to hate the state, and to move our families in the wrong direction. Please vote green.
The clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Will the clerk please call the name of the member who's voting remotely?
Daniels.
Daniels votes aye.
Daniels votes aye.
Voted who'd like to vote? Everybody's voted, so I think we've done that. The clerk will close the roll. There being 61 ayes and 69 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Bakeberg moves to amend Senate File Number 3567. The second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A3.
Representative Bakeberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The A3 amendment is very, very simple. It seeks to restore local control in the areas of student discipline. So we're going to look at one of the 65 mandates centered around student discipline. And really the purpose of this is to maintain a safe learning environment for our students. So what the amendment does is it allows for the dismissal of students in K through 3 when there is a safety threat. It restores the prior law about alternative settings. It repeals the so-called prohibition on recess detention. I think really just at a basic level, this is the next step to not only trust, but to equip and empower our local school districts to keep our kids safe. And I want to look at the Minnesota Principals Survey. These are not my words, these are principals' words around this discipline issue. So this is from the Carey Institute at the University of Minnesota conducted this survey. Principals acknowledge suspension should be used sparingly. It is very, very rare for a student, especially in the K-3 setting, to be suspended from school. But principals feel frustrated that this mandate does not acknowledge what some are saying is a very rare tool. To quote a principal, the K-3 suspension legislation change has us pondering as principals how to support students while also supporting the peers and staff impacted by the behavior and the feedback from families. What that looks like on Tuesday morning is if there was an incident on Monday, very often that student is sitting in class on Tuesday morning. And the student who is the victim in the incident, that it didn't escalate to a major safety issue, that student goes home and they say, "Mom, Dad, Ben was in school today. Why is he in school when he hurt me yesterday?" And then who gets the phone call? The building principal. Really, the secretary or the admin assistant gets the upset phone call, and then it's transferred to the building principal. And then we have to go in and unpack and explain why. The recess detention piece, and this is really interesting, respondents seem frustrated by legislators, that's all of us, that we are predetermining what should and should not be available in regards to discipline and to keep the school safe. Let that sink in. Administrators in your district, I don't know who made that comment, but administrators in your district, in my district, are wondering why we don't trust them. So this is very simple. Do you trust the trained, licensed, and experienced professionals? It's just that simple. If you trust your local administrators, you will vote green on this amendment. Vote green.
There's an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
Franson moves to amend the Bakeberg amendment to Senate File Number 3567, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A35.
The member from Douglas, Representative Franson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, the 835 comes from a situation that happened in my district. In one of the schools, there was a student that was sexually assaulted by another student. The student who was assaulted was picked up forcibly from a hallway, would be thrown into the bathroom stall, assaulted, touched and threatened, hit, and the child would have to crawl underneath the stall to escape from the abuser. And this happened over the course of many months before the parents noticed behavioral changes in the student, and the student informed the parents what had happened. And when the parents and the student went to the school to explain what had happened, the school did suspend the student, but it was temporary. Parents were granted, the student was granted an HRO ex parte. It prevented contact, but did not prevent the offender from being in the school. So forcing that student who had been assaulted to see the person who had assaulted him daily, which, as you can imagine, was traumatic. The child today has post-traumatic stress syndrome. He has attempted suicide. And the school could not remove him due to the fact that he had a right to an education. So the student who was assaulted ended up leaving that school, where the student who was the assaulter continued to stay in the same school. So the student who was assaulted had to transfer schools, is now forming different friendships, and feels like the student himself is the one that is being punished. So the student and the parents have asked me to address this. And the student himself was very pleased to know that there was language out there. The bill has not been introduced yet. It was supposed to be, but should be next week. So that's why we have the amendment here today. But I want to thank Chair Pryor for discussing this issue with me last night and then discussing it after a committee today. And together we will continue working on this language to make sure that we have everything tied up. It is definitely a situation that I would like to close. I've spoken to other members who similar situations have happened in their school districts. The student is also extremely grateful that he is believed, and also wants to thank you for the time today to listen, and to thank the chair too as well for the opportunity to continue this down the road. So with that, I'm going to withdraw the amendment, and thank you for listening to the situation, and thank you for working with me.
Representative Franson withdraws the amendment. On the underlying Bakeberg amendment, discussion. The member from Hennepin, Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Franson, I just want to thank you for sharing that. I mean, those facts are egregious. And hearing those facts, I've worked in education for over a decade, and hearing those facts would actually make it easier for a district to expel a student with those type of facts. So it is incredible to me that there was no action taken with facts like that. So I hope we can figure that out, and I hope that district, after hearing this, actually reevaluates how they deal with situations like that. That should never happen, and it should never be allowed for a student to remain in that environment if they've done things like that. So thank you for sharing that. I'm looking forward to working on things to address issues like that. So thank you for sharing that. To my friend, Representative Bakeberg, I'm going to ask for a no vote on his amendment. And one of the things I want to point out is that, we talk about the academic disparities that we have in this state, and yet we're searching for tools that remove students from the educational setting in a way that would exacerbate those educational disparities. And I think what we did by putting parameters in place to ensure that kids remain in an educational setting is a way toward lessening those educational disparities. And I've heard a lot of talk about, since 2019, we've had this dip in educational attainment. But there are some major things that have happened during that time period. You might recall we had a pandemic during that time period. We had the murder of George Floyd and a worldwide protest during that time period. And we're fooling ourselves if we don't think those external factors haven't impacted our kids in a way that would have an impact on their educational outcomes. We have to acknowledge that. Now, we're doing all we can to try to reverse the impacts of those once in a lifetime, hopefully once in my lifetime, once in our lifetime events that happen. But they did happen, and they are a factor in what's happening with our kids and their educational attainment. But this amendment does not address that. There are exemptions in the law already that deal with if there's a threat of that kid causing harm to themselves or causing harm to other students, that they can be removed. With the recess piece, there is the ability, if parents agree that that kid can be removed, can be held back from recess, the school can do that. I mean, studies show that when kids get out and have some activity outside, like today was a beautiful day, that helps them in terms of their behavior. We don't want to take that away from our kids because it goes toward having better educational outcomes. So I'm going to recommend a no vote for those reasons. Thank you.
Further discussion, the member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, first of all, Representative Frazier, I don't think you are doing all that you can to make up for lost learning during COVID, during the pandemic. The kids should have been in school, but clearly you're not doing all you can because you gave unemployment benefits to all these people that normally work those summer school jobs to help kids get caught up on their lost learning. Now we're missing all those folks from being present to help these kids. We're not helping kids learn when there's chaos in the classroom because of this disciplinary policy. Every year before the legislative session, our school district calls the legislators in, talk about their their priorities for the session. And this year, Anoka Hennepin only had 3. Usually there are more than that. One of them was this rollback of this disciplinary problem, the disciplinary policy that was passed. A second grader that gives us another second grader a bloody nose in the restroom at 12:30 in the afternoon should not be back in the classroom the next morning. And it's not because we want to punish that student. It's because there needs to be a cooling off period, and the teachers, the parents, the administration need to be able to have time to come together to form a plan for what's best for all the students, not just the 2 students that were part of that, but in the classroom in general. Form a plan so we're not kicking one kid out of school permanently, but we can't put a kid that's in that state back in the classroom the next day where they're perceived having no consequences for their actions. That's not okay. Would Representative Ream yield to a question?
I'm sorry, Representative who?
Ream?
Representative Ream.
Yeah.
She will not yield to a question.
Okay.
Representative Scott.
Well, that's unfortunate. I was going to ask, do you think it's okay for a second grader that gives another second grader a bloody nose in the restroom to show up to school the next day? I think that's a pretty easy question to answer, but if she doesn't want to, I understand. But members, this is a common sense thing here. We need to allow teachers, here's the other thing that you're not doing to do all you can to make sure kids learn, because teachers are leaving the classroom because they aren't supported by the policies that we're mandating on them. They can't control the classrooms. They're the ones that are professionally educated, professionally trained to know how to de-escalate and what to do in these situations when kids need some de-escalating. And we're taking a tool out of their toolbox. This is chaos. It's crazy. Thank you, Representative Bakeberg, for bringing this bill. It's so important. It's so common sense. Please vote green on the Bakeberg bill. And if you haven't asked, could we have a roll call for this one?
Representative Scott requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. The member from Washington, Representative Anderson.
Thank you. Washington County, or in Stillwater School District, actually had a very similar experience as Representative Scott talked about occurring in Anoka Hennepin. There's several of my colleagues also represent parts of the Stillwater School District, and we were all together back in January at a breakfast with the superintendent, the school board members, and some teachers. And besides lots of discussion and complaints about the 65 mandates and the fact that they're having budget issues because of that, their number one thing was the student discipline. It was the number one thing. And they said that since they had implemented that, because they were forced to by the state legislature, that they were having like one incident a week in each school of angry parents because there was something happened with the kid, they couldn't do anything about it, and the parent of the victim's parents were incredibly angry. And people are starting to pull their kids more and more out of our public school systems. And it's because of things like this. But it's wrong when we are punishing the victims. We are punishing the victims with this sort of thing. That's wrong. And we shouldn't be coddling people that have poor behavior, whether they're in second grade or in 12th grade. But if you are going to be a perpetrator and harm a little kid, it shouldn't be okay. And that person that's harmed shouldn't have to face their perpetrator the next day in their classroom. And that's what this does. So I ask us to rethink it. My colleagues on both sides of the aisle, Representative Hill, I don't see him, who got it right from the words of our school superintendent and our school board. They ask for us to support this Big Bird Amendment. Thank you.
The member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And thank you, Representative Baker, for the amendment. I just, a lot of good things have already been said, and a lot of true things have already been said. And I was listening to Representative Scott, and she talked about this perception of no consequences when these kids are back in the classroom. And I would say it's not a perception of no consequences. It is no consequences. None. Behavior does not change when there are no consequences. Behavior does not change when there are no consequences. And I get that we have a responsibility to these kids, but guess what? When these classrooms shut down because of the behavior of one kid, there are 30 kids not learning to read. That is the real consequence. You are denying education to every other kid in that classroom. And sometimes not just in that classroom. I mean, we've seen it. When a fight breaks out in a school, they shut down the school. And not a single kid is receiving an education. That is the reality of this policy. It's shocking. But this is what we're doing now. We are catering to the kids with bad behavior. We are catering to the kids who choose not to learn. I can't tell you how many days, I can't tell you how many novels my 16-year-old has read this year in school. And you know why? Because every other day is a work day in class to let all the kids who have not bothered to do homework catch up. Well, she doesn't need to catch up. She does her work. But this is what happens when we're not dealing with behavior when these kids are young. This is what happens. And while we have a responsibility to these kids, and I agree with you on that, we do have a responsibility to these kids. We got to figure something else out. Because by denying consequences for behavior, we are punishing every other kid in that classroom. And we are denying the opportunity to learn to every other kid in that classroom. And when we see what's happening in our schools, when we see that just since 2019, reading proficiency is down 16% in 5 years, it is down, it is decreased. We're going the wrong direction in reading proficiency, math proficiency, science proficiency. What you are doing is not working. And certainly removing the tools from schools to hold kids accountable for bad behavior is not going to solve the problem. It is going to exacerbate these numbers because you are continuing to take away the opportunity for every other kid in that classroom to learn. What you are doing is wrong. You are damaging kids who deserve a shot. They deserve an education. And they deserve an education in a safe place. It's wrong, folks. This is an easy vote. Thank you, Representative Bakeberg, for this amendment. I will be voting yes.
Further discussion to the A3 amendment. Representative Bakeberg.
Thank you, members, for the healthy, robust discussion. Thank you, Representative Franson, for sharing your story. And I wish I could say that that's not happening in other districts, but the simple reality of it is that type of thing is happening. And the truth of the matter, our kids in our schools, they're struggling. Our staff in our schools are struggling. It's a hard job. And one of the things that has struck me when we talk about what happens in schools, we need to remember that those are people that are working really, really hard to do the best job that they can do. And when I make a decision about discipline for a kid, there's probably 3 or 4 other issues that I'm dealing with at the same time. So when I hear us talk about this or that, or we should have done this or should have done that, hindsight's 20/20. We need to give people some grace to work through things. One of the things that we always try to talk about is that discipline is teaching. And we have to have a broad range of tools within the toolbox to be able to teach appropriately. And sometimes the best tool is to tell a first grader, you know what, you're going home. And we need to reset here at school. And then we do something called a restorative conversation, and we repair. But it takes time to do that. And when we don't listen to our educators, the people that are professionals, that are trained, and we say in this body, we know better than you, that's offensive. Because we don't know better than them. Rep. Frazier, you are 100% correct. There are significant external factors impacting our schools. And right now, our schools have to deal with everything. And they should not be the solver of every societal issue. We've talked about that tonight. And the reality of it is, where things are right now, they're not able to use the tools that they've used in the past, so then resources are taken from other areas. So if a student is not able to be sent home, if a student is not able to have a recess detention, that student has to be somewhere in the school. So we have to think about the unintended consequences. That's why I would encourage you to vote green again. Let's trust our trained, experienced professionals. If you went to principal for a day, you would have heard about this. Vote green.
The clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Will the clerk please call the name of the member who's voting remotely?
Daniels.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Daniels votes aye.
Daniels votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 62 ayes and 68 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File Number 3567, as amended.
Third reading as amended. Discussion to the bill. The member from St. Louis, Representative Zalesnikar.
Madam Speaker, members, it's getting late, and we all want to go home. And I guess when I listened to all the conversation that's went on in this bill, there's a few things that I just want to highlight. In a previous bill, we talked about transparency. We talked about junk fees over and over and over. And yet, making sure we get these MCA tests in less than 8 months can't happen, even though it's been happening for 20 years. It doesn't seem like it's transparency to our parents, transparency for our kids. So we're lacking transparency in something called education for our families and for our kids, which doesn't seem to need to happen. The second thing that caught me by surprise was listening to the teacher prep program part. Not having to have teachers show return demonstration for competency seemed odd to me, because RNs, LPNs, CNAs, I can go down the list, have to show. In fact, this body wrote the assisted living rules. A CNA has to show. You have your certificate, you go take your coursework, you test it out. Guess what you get to do when you get hired by the nursing home in Cambridge, the nursing home in Mankato? You get to do it all over again. You get to do return competency, even if you're an RN. We do return competency in many professions, but we're not going to do it in education. So I'm wondering if we're going to stop doing return competency for the other professions. Is that part of the plan? Is it going to be part of the plan to end the punitive model of fines for nursing homes and assisted livings? Because we don't fine. We have an education model with 50% of our kids reading at grade level, and we accept that. We give the same amount of money. We don't fine anybody. And yet that's not the world we're in any other lane. And so what are we doing for our educators? We are mandating them, and they're asking for this body's help Let us get back to the basics. Let us get back to what we're here to do. Because the reality is, if a kid can't read, there's no greater discrimination. Talk about being oppressed. If you can't read, that's the pathway you're going to, because your income is going to be oppressed for a lifetime. I'll guarantee you, if you do a study on that, it will show the direct correlation. We've already talked about how many mandates. That's all I've heard in 2024 from the districts I represent. We're swimming in mandates. Can you lower the number of classroom days we have to do so we can figure out how to do classroom the training for our teachers? The teachers, the educators, everybody is asking for help. And we're just saying, no, we're going to add more things, keep going on this path. So yes, there's some things that happened. We have menstrual products. I wasn't against that. Did I think it was nuts to put them in boys' bathroom in 4th grade? Yeah, probably. I don't think that's a great idea. And the people that have emailed me don't think it's a great idea either. And while we've done those things, we still don't have kids reading at grade level. I don't know how many times we say that. Our classrooms that get the highest funding to the lowest funding. I've looked at all the districts. And Representative Quam said it. He has a district that has very low funding and has very high outcomes. So we have to be willing to look at what we're doing and how we are supporting our educators, because I've been in every classroom. I think if you're a legislator, you shouldn't make bills for education unless you're spending time in all your classrooms back in the district. I don't think we should write rules if you're on the committees for public safety unless you're riding in a police car and going back in the district to do that. The same with human service, the same with childcare. We cannot legislate down here without knowing and actually knowing what happens in these fields. And there's several bills being dropped that say, look, if you're going to be involved in that, you're going to actually go back and be a part of the job and see what is going on. Because it's easy to legislate here. But I'll tell you what, the educators are very dismayed because we keep telling them we had historic investment, and yet we have historic layoffs. Every time I get the paper, a new school's announcing that they're having layoffs. How does that match? Historic investment, and we have historic layoffs. So if the districts don't have flexibility to decide when they implement all these mandates, we're going to continue on this path. So all the things you're proposing to accomplish, I would challenge you to say, I don't think the historical story is going to say that. Because we're in layoffs right now. And we're not fooling the educators. I'm getting bombarded with people asking me, what's going on? How can we have historic layoffs when we supposedly had historic investments? And they aren't even done with it yet because we haven't implemented the Family Medical Leave Act. I just got emails from districts on the sick and safe leave, how it's impacting them. We're not done. So members, we absolutely have to change course. Education has to matter in Minnesota. I urge you to vote no.
The member from Meeker, Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. It's been a very fun night. Just want to recap briefly some of the, I think, main topics that we've been talking about. Literacy is learning, empower parents, local control is important. We've had a lot of messages, a lot of very important things said here tonight, and I guess I'm going to dovetail just a little bit in my comments on our most recent conversations dealing with discipline. Now, I appreciate earlier actions that we took regarding SROs that help to make our schools and our students safer. However, I do remain concerned about the safety of support staff and teachers in our schools. Now, over the years, I have frequently, probably each year the last half dozen, brought up legislation to try to deal with what I feel are abuses of staff in our schools. I've heard stories about teachers being punched, dropped, not just by high school students. In committee and other places, I've told the story of the rather large second grade boy who picked up his teacher and dropped her on her head, broke her neck. The teacher's career was done, but nothing happened to the young man at all. So what are the repercussions for these actions? What happens to the students who are perpetrators? Very little, and in some cases, nothing. In the past, I've tried to offer legislation to address this, as I said. Now, my focus was not to punish the student, but to ascertain why this behavior was happening and to offer help. Maybe remove the student for a few days and just try to find out what's going on in this student's life. I've gotten nowhere with that. Schools must be safe for everyone. Safety drills in schools have been one of my hallmark pieces of legislation. We must continue to ensure that all students and staff are treated with respect and feel safe in our schools. And I wish that this bill did more to recognize that. Thank you.
The member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'm pro-choice. I'm pro-local control choice, so that we have choices over the mandates. If we don't go for that, the second best thing are high-performing schools that are delivering for their community, for their students, would have 2 years to implement mandates so they don't disrupt a working, highly functional system in that school. So, you get me saying on the House floor I'm pro-choice. On the discipline, my son in 5th grade got a recess suspension. He knew he would get it, but there was a fellow student in his class that had a lot of physical issues. And kids from the grade level lower were picking on him, so he and another student came up and stood up for that student. He got suspended because of the actions, but he knew what it was, he made the choice, and he took the punishment, and he was fine with that because, I think I was fine with him being suspended, but I understood, he stood up. That boy ended up not living past his teens. But structure and making sure the students know there are repercussions for their actions is why some years ago there was a North Minneapolis charter school with the same demographics, but they had structure, they had expectations for their students, and they had 100% graduation. If you have the discipline and the rules and the expectation that they will behave, they behave better. If you have local control to address the issues, they do better. I'm shocked that you didn't take a lot of these amendments that would have given that. I'm disappointed. I'm going to vote no.
The member from Cass, Representative Knudsen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, committee hearing after committee hearing, both this year and last, we heard from so many different parts of the educational system. We heard from the department. We've heard from school administrators, teachers, paraprofessionals, food service workers, and even bus drivers. But do you know who we rarely hear from? Parents. So much of what we do in committee has been focused on, not just this year, but last year as well, taking power and control away from the most local form of government, families. Parents know what's best for their children. And directly beyond that, the local school boards that are often comprised of parents and grandparents of the children in their schools. But bill after bill, you've taken this authority away. We are in an educational crisis in Minnesota. Less than half of our students can read at grade level. Less than half. Worse than that are our math scores. Since Governor Walz took office in 2019, the reading proficiency is down 16%. Math proficiency is down 17%. Science, 23%. Admiring the problem is no longer enough. Our school administrators, our educators, and our parents working together in our communities can improve our schools and improve our students' performance. But when you try to hide the truth from the public and from our parents, you are just inviting more of the same. Parents know their children best. They see their struggles and their successes every single day. They are their biggest supporters. Members, we can do better. Our children deserve better. Empowering parents empowers students.
The member from Scott, Representative Bakeberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. Thank you for a good discussion about what I believe is the most important thing that we can discuss here, our kids. Before I jump in, I want to thank Chair Pryor for her work in committee, for her leadership in committee, but also to Chair Pryor and to other members that are retiring to your service to your constituents. We're not always going to agree on different topics, but all of us choose to serve here, so thank you to Chair Pryor. Thank you to the staff that do an amazing job in committee, regardless of your party. I want to take a minute and just recognize Jody Withers, though he does a fantastic job for us, and he's super uncomfortable right now, which is kind of fun to see. But, you know, I'm sure some of you are wondering, why are we talking about the bill last year? And I think Chair Pryor indicated that, and I think one of the reasons we're talking about and highlighting that is because we heard a lot about it. It didn't matter where I went, whatever setting I was in, even in my own building. We heard about successes, but we heard about the significant struggles of implementation. And my real hope is that we would actually listen to the people that do the job every single day. And I think that's probably my biggest disappointment with this bill, is that we didn't really, truly listen. We didn't show humility and say, you know what? We swung and missed. We missed a few things. Let's go back and fix that. I've been in my position as a principal long enough that right now I'm changing things that I thought were a great idea 8 years ago. And I was convinced I was right. And now I look back and I'm like, I was dead wrong. We have to do that in this body. Education does not need to be a partisan battle. It does not need to be. We can come together. We did that earlier. And we can solve problems. We can have rigorous debates and discussions about what's right and what's wrong from our perspective. And guess what? We can learn from each other and maybe change our perspective. That's what I've done my entire career in education. Those of you that have served Representative Hill, I'm sure you've done the same thing. But we have to show humility. We have to listen. And when we do that, we have to act. Because when we don't, kids are impacted. And generations are impacted. I wish we would have done more of that in this bill. And that's why I'll be voting no.
The member from Anoka, Representative Norris.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. One of the topics that I think we can all agree on the importance of is the mental health of our students. And that's why I was so alarmed last year when one of my constituents, his name is Brian, came to my office and told me the story of the challenge he had of getting space at his daughter's high school for her to do Zoom appointments with her therapist. She was hoping to do them after school and before practice started. And originally, he reached out to the school, and they said no. And so he appealed it up the ranks through the district. When they all said no, he went to the state and the Department of Education. And when they said no, he took it to the federal government. And they said no. And the fortunate thing is that eventually he did find somebody at the school district through the community ed department who was able to get some space for his daughter Brielle to do her Zoom therapy appointments before practice. And he thought he had solved the problem. But when he was driving home with his daughter one day, she said, "Dad, you solved our problem, but what about all the students across Minnesota who don't have a dad like you who can spend all this time and navigate these systems to solve their problem?" And so that's what led him to my office. And I said, let's work on a bill. And so we drafted it up. We introduced it. We worked really hard throughout the interim with the representatives from all the different school organizations to address their concerns and try to make sure that it worked for the logistics in their buildings. We got it heard, and today I'm proud that it is part of this great bill that we're going to be passing off the House floor. So I want to thank Brian, I want to thank Brielle for their courageous advocacy, and I want you to know that because of you, so many more students are going to be able to access the mental health resources that they need.
The member from Mauer, Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members, and it's been a good, robust debate. We're all tired and ready to go home, so thank you for sticking it out and letting us discuss one of the most important topics that I think we need to talk about here in the legislature. As we continue to talk about all the many different provisions in this bill, listening to the moving story that Representative Norris just talked about, I try to remember that, you know, when we are really trying to prioritize what to focus on here in this body, that there really isn't anything more fundamental than reading. Just in the time that we've been on the floor right now, from 3 o'clock to almost midnight, we've had hundreds of sheets of paper put in front of us that we are to read, analyze, examine, and process. And all of us were taught how to do that. And yet, we have students in our classroom right now who cannot. We have teachers who were not taught correctly, And they are struggling because they want to do everything they can to help those students. And rather than fail the students, which they feel like, they wonder what's wrong with them. There's a vested interest in many of the things that we've heard about. There's a vested interest in keeping the system the same. And this body last year said that literacy was important. This body last year decided that reading was foundational. And we all acknowledged the problem. And we decided we would do something about it. And we're not done, because the bill is not right yet. There is nothing more important than educating the next generation. Our children are so important, and the teachers who teach them are heroes. They deserve better literacy instruction. Our children deserve better literacy instruction that's based on the science of reading. They deserve to have teacher prep programs be held accountable so that they can go and do their job with fidelity and excellence. Because I don't know what teacher doesn't want to do that. Without the provisions of polishing the READ Act, we really are saying, look, we just did this. Without taking the amendments that we offered today, especially the one that says, let's just hold up a little bit so we can focus on the most fundamental skills of teaching our children to read, of teaching our teachers reading instruction based on the science of reading, rejecting the charlatans that have sold us a lie. Instead of doing that, our schools are being crushed by mandate after mandate after mandate after mandate that costs more money and more money and more money. More time, more resources. We need, especially in the second year of the biennium, we need to look at what has happened, be laser focused on how we're going to change it, how we're going to go back and say, okay, let's look again, give our focused policy changes, focused finances, and make sure that we honor the schools that we represent. Madam Speaker and members, because of some of the glaring errors that we see, the glaring blank spots that we're seeing in this bill, I would urge members a no vote.
The member from Washington, Representative Hill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the great debate and discussion here tonight in the chamber. I want to begin by thanking Chair Pryor for her incredible leadership, her dedication, and her passionate advocacy for all of Minnesota's kids across the entire state. And while we've had a great discussion and many disagreements, something was said recently during the discussion that caught my ear, and it was that we need to listen. And we need to listen to any number of different stakeholders when we put together a policy bill like the one in front of us here tonight. We need to listen to our students. We need to listen to our teachers. We need to listen to our parents. We need to listen to our administrative colleagues, our school boards. We need to listen to all of them and do our best to take in all of their viewpoints and their perspectives and to try to move forward in a way that's going to benefit our students in the end. One of the things that's buried not too deep in this bill, I believe it's on the third page, that I want to highlight works to address some of the needs that I heard about from every level of our stakeholders around our schools. And it has to do with the widespread use of cell phones in schools and the harm they're causing. Unfortunately, from what I've seen in an instructional role, administrative role, and other roles that I've fulfilled within the school district, that oftentimes many of the issues that we're facing with behavioral incidents, with mental health concerns, and so many other elements that are negative experiences for our students, the beginning of them, their genesis is on social media, on these cell phones. And so I want to thank Representative Feist for doing the important work to bring a bill that's going to allow for some of the stakeholders that I recently mentioned, experts, our principals from our elementary and our secondary principal organizations, to come around this issue and to develop some best practices to equip our districts to address this problem. The number one concern I hear from our parents that I talk to, of students at every level of our schools, has to do with cell phones. And so I want to thank Representative Feist for that incredible work to address this. And I look forward to the outcomes of that working group and where the rubber hits the road with their findings on those best practices. And look forward to working and leading to a reduction in these behavioral incidents, looking forward to improved student mental health, and in the end, improve student learning. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Freeborn, Representative Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to start out by just saying thank you to Chair Pryor, to Vice Chair Hill, for the committee staff. I just so appreciate the respect and the kindness that I saw and your hard work. So thank you very much for that. And to all the members on both sides of the aisle of the Education Policy Committee, thanks for your respectful dialogue and discussion. It was good. That's the kind of thing that we need, so I appreciate that. I'll just share a few things about this bill. First of all, some areas that I agree with. I think it's excellent that we're streamlining the special ed paperwork for the adaptive PE assessments. There's a PSEO notification component in this bill that would help students not fall in the cracks, students that are in PSEO and drop out or aren't attending, that would notify the schools about that. The clear criteria for flexible learning days, the 4-day week that Representative Baker has been working on with others. Appreciate those things being in there. But then there's areas that I do believe will be harmful in the end. And one would be delaying the test results that we talked about. I won't belabor that, but parents and communities deserve to get those results sooner, much sooner than what this bill is effecting. The changes in the Tier 1 and 2 licensure, I think that's going to hurt our recruitment for teachers, both in special ed and regular ed. The charter schools being treated differently than regular public schools in some clawback fund components, and then just adding more mandates. There are more mandates in this bill, and if there's one thing districts and schools and teachers and administrators have told us is like, please stop the mandates. They need to catch up and figure this out. So I'll just touch on a few things. Number one, we've talked a lot about literacy and the importance, because literacy is learning. There are no provisions in this bill to address that number one priority. Literacy is a crisis. And it's not just literacy, and all these things are areas that we're failing in, and it's the strategies that we have chosen as a legislature throughout the years, but especially in the last, say, 5 years, we've just seen it on steroids. The strategies are failing. Here's a report card for our schools. Reading proficiency. Currently in the state, 49.9% of students are proficient in reading. Now, if we related that, I asked Representative Bakeberg, I said, I taught first grade, so we didn't grade like that, but in the upper grades, you have percentages. Well, if it's below 60%, you know what the grade is? It's an F. So reading proficiency, F. Math proficiency in our state is at 45.5%. That's how many students are proficient in math. That's an F. Science proficiency, 39.2% of students are proficient. I think if you can get below an F, it would be that, an F minus. Consistent attendance, 69.8% of students consistently attend school. Well, that's a D. So that's the top grade that we're getting now. And I'm not blaming our teachers or administrators, because we're the ones that are telling them and mandating them all these things. And it's evident, members, that our strategies are not working. This system is blinking red. You know, I'm kind of a Trekkie. I love Star Trek. Any other Trekkies in here? I don't think I would dress up in the costumes, but I love Star Trek. And I have all of the old original shows. And you remember how that siren goes off and Captain Kirk, you know, he's like, red alert, and then the sirens and the blinking. That's what our system is doing right now. It is blinking red. It is screaming for innovation. And instead, we do these top-down mandates. Local control is innovation. It's not mandates, it's local control. That's how schools innovate and are able to address some of these things, these academics that are screaming for the innovation. Test reporting. We're leaving our parents out of this. We need engaged parents. Empowered parents are engaged parents. If we empower parents by helping them know how their students are doing sooner, we can engage those parents and get them involved in our schools and education and get into that innovation. We're lowering expectations in this bill for both teachers and students. And finally, we're not doing anything to relieve our schools from these 65 new mandates that we put upon them last year. Matter of fact, we're adding more of them. One of the superintendents who spoke in our committee called those mandates torpedoes. And I thought, well, I remember I used to love to play Battleship, that game, and the electronic one had this salvo component where you could launch all of your torpedoes at one time. That's what we did last year. We sent a salvo of torpedoes onto our school districts. They're swimming in those things, and they're not able to focus on what they really need to focus on. Mostly literacy. So I appreciate the hard work, but I do recommend a red vote. Thank you.
The author of the bill, the member from Hennepin, Representative Pryor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members, for sticking with us tonight. I think we can term it a wide-ranging discussion that we've had covering many decades. At the beginning, I did some highlights of the bill. From time to time, we did hear something about the bill tonight, and I hope you read your bill briefs. So I'm just going to turn to the thank yous. So first of all, thank you to all the authors that brought these bills to the committee, because this is actually what we're voting on tonight, and it was great work, and I really appreciate it, and it came from both sides of the aisle. So good things are going to turn out from that. And then also, even if your bill is not in here, you were part of the discussion and you contributed to the discussion. And so appreciate your being and doing that work. So that's the beginning of the thank yous. Next, the committee members. It was a very strong committee, a very respectful committee, and thank you for everything you contributed these last 2 years. Thank you to Lee Bennett for anchoring and being a partner, and you have been a partner, and we have been partners, and I appreciate that. So then I want to turn specifically to the way and why this works is because we have incredible staff people. And so I want to talk about just the people that are there, making sure that things work, like TV sets come on and Zoom meetings. Maddie Ryan, our page. Barry LaGrave, House Public Information, Bill Broom, Remote CART Coordinator, Brian Basham, who is the writer, that people can follow the committee, see what's going on. Nonpartisan, Christine Parra, Tim Strom, Cassandra McGinnis from the Revisor's Office, and of course, the staff that we work most closely with and know best. So Isabel Anderson, Wilson Lee, our committee administrator and CLA, and then, of course, the researchers that actually are the brains of the outfit that we all depend on. So on both sides, Mr. Jody Withers and Mr. Morris Beltrandi-Ronquist. Great people to work with, and please vote green.
The clerk will take the roll on the bill. Will the clerk please call the name of the member who's voting remotely?
Daniels.
Daniels votes red.
Daniels votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 69 ayes and 61 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to.